People of Earth, we have come to upgrade your cosmic consciousness. DNA activation ready. In 3, 2, 1.
Hi, welcome to Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership. I'm Louis Quinto.
I'm Craig Anderson.
Today, our topic that we're going to cover is keeping remote employees engaged. That seems to be something that I think everybody, we've taken the move toward a more remote employee staffing. And how do we keep those people engaged?
Right.
So what we're going to do in order to explore this particular area is we're going to cover 3 areas. The first one is how to create the virtual, we call it a water cooler. It could be a coffee pot, whatever it is, snack break room. But how do you create that virtually? How do we recognize employees and their accomplishments while they're remote? And then lastly, what we want to do is we want to make sure that when we engage those employees that we give them access to all of the data that they need in order to get their job.
Yep.
So the very first one, Craig, talk to me about creating the virtual water cooler or snack room or break room, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I think we need to figure out ways, you try and do this in office spaces today as areas where you can have intentional collisions, right, where people can kind of meet and interact in a way they might not. So how do you do that virtually? Tools like
why is that important?
Well, I think it's important because a lot of information, as many formal channels as you create to share information, a lot of information comes through informal channels.
Yeah.
So, there's stuff that's going to be shared by text. There's going to be instant messaging, apps like Slack, Google Hangout, whatever you might use in your company. These are just ways where people can kind of have those personal conversations. And I think it's important to kind of put those tools out there, probably not multiple different versions, but have one tool out there that's for how people can communicate both formally and informally through your organization and create those kind of intentional collisions.
Yeah.
And since a lot of what we talk about here is for leaders is, if you're a leader, you need to use these tools as well.
Absolutely.
Don't just put them out there and say, hey, go, here's Slack, go. You as the leader need to kind of build that, and you and your leadership team need to build that into your schedule and engage that way with your remote employees as well.
Yeah, that informal, as you call it, deliberate collisions is quite important because people begin to talk. They come up with ideas. They do things that they probably wouldn't normally do in a formal business setting because of like groupthink, peer pressure takes into control, things like that, censorship, all of those symptoms of groupthink. But when 2 people are off, 3 people are off on the side getting a cup of coffee and they start talking about something, it's amazing. They feel freer to talk about instances or situations, problems that they're having, and they get offered solutions. And when you're working remote, you don't want to be on that island all by yourself and everything. You want to be able to give your employees that area that they can go, that space where they can share things and talk to people in an informal manner. So creating that virtual water cooler, and we're really dating ourselves with virtual water cooler, but we'll take it at that. Okay, the next area is recognizing accomplishments. One of the things I think in a previous episode, or maybe it was in our top 20 tips for 2020, we talked about catching people doing something right. And when you catch me doing something right and you recognize me right then and there for something I've done, I get that recognition, I get that good feeling, and I get that motivation to move forward and to move, do even better next time. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist when you have remote employees because they're remote, they're gone, they're by themselves, and so if they do something right, you may not find out about it till 2 or 3 days later. And at that point, trying to recognize people, it doesn't have the same effect by catching them right in the office. So you need to be able to find a way to recognize accomplishments and deliver that recognition immediately.
Oh yeah, and I think it's you run into out of sight, out of mind sometimes, especially if remote workers are maybe a quarter of your staff, not all of your staff. So you have kind of the people,
which also creates, I don't mean to interrupt, but it creates an us versus them.
Oh yeah.
Those people in the office or those people not in the office.
Right. And so I think it's important to not get to out of sight, out of mind, right? Be engaged, be involved, reach out to those people. I always tried to be out kind of in a common area to, a couple times a day to make sure I could talk to employees, but I had to really set some of those things up when I had the remote employees. So I would have to kind of reach out to them, ping them on, the Messenger app or whatever it might be, but it's important to kind of build those conversations and have those informal conversations with your remote employees that you have with your in-office employees. And part of that is recognizing accomplishments, right? So don't loop them out of like an employee of the month, just because they're remote. Because you don't see them every day.
Well, at least maybe I can then use their parking spot because they're not going to be using it in the parking lot.
You laugh, but we had the parking spot, and it was vacant for a month, except some people got a little cagey. So, but it's important to kind of recognize those accomplishments and really include them, because that's how you keep people engaged in what you're doing.
Yeah. And the third area we're going to cover is making sure you're giving access to your remote employees of all the data that they need in order to get their job done. I know in different situations that there are some applications that you can only be able to access if you're in the office because of security, confidentiality reasons, and things like that. And if you've got a remote workforce and they can't have access to the information that they need, it's going to prevent them from doing their job. And so we're not going to get into a whole bunch of discussions on confidentiality and all of that privacy act that the information only stays in the office. But you need to remember that if you've got a remote workforce and they need access to data, they need to find some way to be able to access that data. I mean, that's clear and simple.
And that's not just files and folders, right? I remember you always would walk into those conference rooms, right, where somebody had a big meeting, and up in the corner, there's all this writing on the whiteboard, and up in the corner says save, right? So that's saved. But if you're remote, how do you see saved?
Yeah.
So, be cognizant of that, and, maybe you need to take a picture of that, put that in the project file so that the remote worker can see it just as easily as everybody who walks by. And if you want real fun, I always enjoyed writing Ferris under the save. Just wander into remote conference rooms and save Ferris. It was a great time for me. So
is that one of your favorite movies?
It actually is. So, but really, it's not to come back to my constant theme, but I always will. It's about being intentional. It's about thinking about, hey, if I was remote, would I need to see this piece of information? How critical is this? So you have to think it through. It's not just the legalities or the technologies.
Right.
It's also kind of that informal piece that you might walk by and see, but how do you get that out there for everybody?
Yeah, that's at the end of a meeting, taking pictures of all the whiteboards and flip charts and things like that, and posting them online or in, something, whatever application you may be using, Google app or something like that, so that this way people can then see the work that may have taken place in that room.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
Good.
Very good.
Okay, so key takeaways. Wow. Remote workforce takes a lot of work.
Well, remote workforce takes a lot of thought, is what I would say. Is this is where we're going. I think we're going to see more of it. People want to live where they want to live. They want to do the job they want to do. So that's great. So let's find ways to accommodate it, and really also think about the ways that you can accommodate it and make them part of your organization. Engagement is why people stay.
Yeah.
So you've got to think about how you're driving engagement with these remote employees. So that's kind of my takeaways. Be intentional about thinking how you're going to keep those people in the loop, and don't just treat them as kind of these other folks, right? They're part, it's all the same team trying to move the organization forward. So make sure you loop them in as much as you would anybody in the office.
Yeah, and it goes back to the analogy I said. A remote employee without proper planning, without the proper tools provided to them, can feel like they're out on an island all by themselves.
Absolutely.
And that informal contact, I think that's the most important key takeaway, is to create that informal contact, that snack room, break room, coffee shop, water cooler, whatever you want to call it. I think that's important to create that for that virtual employee, to have those informal discussions with the people with whom they're working with, or even people who they're not working with, that may be able to share some ideas that they're doing that could apply to what they're doing. And I think losing that informal setting to be able to share and discuss things, I think it can really take away from a business. And so my key takeaway is to create that virtual water cooler for your folks.
Great. Very good. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for today's episode. If you would, like it, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it out on your social media if you found this to be insightful or helpful for you. Spread it around a bit, and we'll see you next time. And then until then, I'm Craig Anderson.
And I'm Louis Quinto.